Hi everyone, my name is Naomi Hartl and welcome to our Enchanted Engineers webinar with our guest speaker, Lynette Dickerson. We are here to share, Lynette's here to share 4 different activities that integrate fairy tales and STEM concepts together. So as I said previously, my name is Naomi Hartl. I am the STEM and science subject matter expert for school specialty. I am a former educator myself, and I'll be moderating this webinar, jumping in with some questions, sharing some commentary with Lynette. And then in the top photo you'll see there, that's Lynette Dickerson, our amazing guest speaker. And I'm going to pass it over to Lynette to introduce herself and get us started.
Hello, I'm Lynette Dickerson. I am a STEM and science consultant with School Specialty. I am also a former educator, and I've taught everything from kindergarten up through some high school science level subjects. And let's jump right in on how we will integrate fairy tales and STEM together. Our objectives today are recognizing how simply and important it can be to put fairy tales and STEM together. We're going to trigger creativity by asking what if questions and imagining possibilities beyond the story as we know them. Why should we combine fairy tales and engineering anyway? Fairy tales are already a part of all elementary school curriculums across the country. Therefore, adding this into a science curriculum will not be something different. It will just be something additional. And anything is possible in a fairy tale, just as anything is impossible with engineering. So the connections and cross-curricular concepts are limitless. Fairy tales encourage students to begin to solve problems and generate new ideas. As with fairy tales, the characters all start out with problems, and by the end, they've learned how to either solve them or they get themselves mixed up in something else. So we'll have students learn how to design engineering concepts to continue to get these characters to solve the problems. Children already know a lot about fairy tales, so time isn't wasted reading a new story or a new concept. You can review the story and move on into the engineering process. Fairy tales are also relatively short, and the format is easy to understand. Whether you're working with ESL learners or you're integrating a story from a different country, the plot is easy to discuss and the problem easy to understand. Our first one that we'll look at today is Cinderella. So a STEM challenge for Cinderella, we're going to begin by pretending that Cinderella's fairy godmother has gotten lost right before midnight. Cinderella is stuck at the ball and she needs a ride home. So the challenge for your students will be to design a wind-powered coach to get her home. The criteria must be the coach needs to travel 3 meters in 12 seconds. You must provide the wind, and the challenge must be completed within 15 minutes. Supplies for individual students will be 1 piece of paper, 6 centimeters of tape, and 1 straw. For the group will be a pair of scissors and a measuring tape.
So Lynette, I'm going to jump in and ask a question here. Do you read your stories to students first? Like, do you read the fairy tale story and then introduce the STEM engineering challenge? Do you have them do the challenge first and then create and then read the story after the fact to kind of see how they kind of integrate together? What's kind of a process that you would recommend or suggest to teachers out there?
I would say teachers and best practices always go hand in hand. And depending on your class and depending on the time of year, if you've read the story, jump on in. Use it as a reintroduction of the story. If you've not read the fairy tale yet, use it as an introduction and build on the skill. So it could definitely go both ways. That's a great question.
So what are some examples that you've seen students make this? So I know we have like a piece of paper, 6 centimeters of tape, and 1 straw. Have you noticed that students will like create their wheels first? Do they create like a cylinder with the paper and blow it that way? Have you seen like just kind of really creative things, or kids, do they usually kind of stick to the same process
I've
or the
seen it a
same outcome,
variety.
I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a variety of ways. I've seen the wheels. I've seen them cut it up into spiral shapes.
Mhm.
I've seen kind of where they've done a corkscrew type shape where it will almost spring. So a spring type corkscrew, which was very unique.
Mhm.
Other children have done things like origami that will jump similar to the frog, the origami shaped frog. But then others have done things where they fold the paper quite small and they use the straw more as the coach
Mhm.
and the straw and the paper as a guide. So it's very unique. Children always amaze me at what they come up with when they're given the parameters to be creative and they're not limited. They always rise to the occasion.
That's cool. I was thinking, I was like, I wonder if any kids would um, build a like paper airplane. I feel like that's something I would do. It's like, well, technically, they didn't say we couldn't throw it that far. The wind has to blow it, but it could carry
That's
it. But
true. It
yes,
could carry
you
it. That would be a
you
great
get
argument.
yes, yes, exactly. Yeah. So, and I mean, I think that goes to it too, because I know on the previous slide there was some criteria. You might get kids asking, well, can we do this? It's like, well, look at the criteria. If I haven't said it, you can do it technically.
Correct.
So lots of
Absolutely
different things that
correct.
you can do. Lots of different things you can do in this challenge. All right, I will let you move on and I'll bring some more questions into the next activity.
Absolutely. Our next challenge is engineering on the fly, Rapunzel style. One misconcept that I see as I'm teaching different teachers and working with different teachers is a lot of times I hear, I don't have time to integrate STEM into my literature or into my lessons. And I know time is a big challenge. It's a challenge for everyone. It was a challenge when I was in the classroom. I'm sure it was a challenge when Naomi was in the classroom. And I know that's not going anywhere. However, we can all find 5 minutes in our day as either a transitional time or even as an encouragement to the kids if you find that they're needing to refocus or just a variety of things. Even as a reward, STEM can be very rewarding to the kids to help them calm down, as I said earlier, to refocus. And in this challenge, students will be given 5 minutes to see who can build the tallest standing tower to rescue Rapunzel. And here, students may work alone or with a partner or with a group. And I always encourage teachers, you know your classroom, you know your students, and these are just suggestions on how to do these activities. You alone know your children and students better than I would because I've never met them. So modify activities based on your students. And so the supplies for this activity are very simple. It's just pipe cleaners. And of course, this is a green activity, I like to say, because you can reuse the pipe cleaners over and over. So if you do this one day and you want to do it later in the week or the following week, students can also measure their progress and track it and see if they can get it bigger or make improvements, just as engineers would. And there's also lots of modifications that you can do with this. And it's good to see the progress throughout the year.
Yeah, and getting to see the kids as they build and as they grow, they're learning different concepts, they're learning different ideas. So they might do one challenge, you might even come back to another challenge after, right? One that you've already done, but after doing multiple challenges in between, they've learned something from that process. And then we ask them, hey, do you think you could build your tower bigger now that you've built a bridge and you've done this and you've done that? Or you've learned this skill and this skill and this skill. So it's really cool to monitor and watch their progress. I also wanted to comment on the part about when you were talking about time and how this one's really just a 5 minute challenge. I also think, time was one of the things that we didn't have as educators. There's not enough time in a day to get everything done. There's not enough time in a day to plan for everything. But the thing I like about integrating fairy tales and the STEM concepts together is that it's almost like a cross curricular piece. You're integrating those STEM concepts, but you're also, that reading, that literacy piece where you can combine those together. You're saving time in in essence that you're now putting two things into one project. So you can spend a little bit more time with your students on this project, giving them time to learn and build and grow and problem solve. But then it's also that short period of time too. So I just wanted to kind of add to that. I do have a question about this one. When you are talking about time with your students, do you, because it's only 5 minutes, and sometimes students, depending on what age group you're doing with, they may not have the best concept of time. How do you show them how much time is left? Do you just say it? Do you pop it up on, do you write it on the board? Do you have a projector and your computer with a Google timer on? I'm curious to know how you have done it in the past.
I've tried it a couple ways. I've used the timer on the smart board, which is a big one. When I was in my personal classroom, I had a timer that was very, very visual for students that needed that visual aid that might not have been the best with numbers, but they were good with their colors and visual aids. I had a timer that was by Learning Resources, and I know it's available through us as well. It worked similar to a stoplight. And so while they had plenty of time, it was green. As time started to dwindle down, it went to yellow, and then when time was up, it changed to red. And so that's how exactly students knew the process, and it also helped them, they could compare the timers as well to the numbers and to the visual timer. So both worked very well.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that, the color code piece too, because some kids respond better to that than just seeing those numbers too. So no, that's
exactly
awesome. Awesome. I also wanted to share a story here too. I was at a conference not too long ago, and it was, I believe the session was called Engineer Eyes or something like that. And in that, one of the challenges that we had was building a tower because of a story we had just read. It wasn't a fairy tale story, but it was another story. And I loved the idea of it. So when Lynette was talking about this activity, it's like another way that you could do this one if you wanted to add a little bit more equipment or pieces to it, is to give students, so what we were given, and I'll have a photo for you at the very, very end of the webinar, and it's kind of funny because the towers, I mean, I thought it was fantastic at the time, but you look at it, you're like, wow, that's a sad looking tower. But the rules were you had 3 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, you had 3 paper clips, and then you had a forearm length of tape. So of course, knowing my competitive side and my group's competitive side, we measured everybody's forearms to see who had the longest forearm, so that we would have the longest piece of tape. So we tried to be clever there. And we had 5 minutes, only 5 minutes, to try and build it as tall as possible. And the presenter, the challenge that she gave us was, she was about 5'1", and she said that the tallest tower ever built, now those kids had about 15 minutes to do it, but the tallest tower ever built was slightly taller than she was. And we're like, what, with only 3 pieces of paper? We're like, how does that happen? So everybody was, rummaging around trying to figure it out. And one group ended up cutting up their paper and then realized that they're like, oh no, like this actually isn't going to work. So one of the conversations that we had, and Lynette, I'm curious to know if you've had conversations or done this with your students, is they said, some teachers will say this is all the material that you get, and once you've had it, you're done, and you've got to just use what you've created. So if you cut everything up, you're going to have to figure out how to build it with what you've cut up. Whereas the presenters that we had, they said, because of the way the engineering design process works and how we're always revamping, we're always trying new, we're always starting over and learning from what we've created, they said, if you cut something up and you realize it's not working, come back and get the materials that you need again from start, and start from scratch and build and grow so that you can be the most successful, which I thought was pretty cool. So Lynette, I'm curious to see if you've put restraints onto your students before, which is also another challenge, right? It's like you only get this material. So, I mean, there's 2 different ways to kind of do it, but curious to know what your thoughts are on that one.
I've actually done it both ways. Both ways being, once you're starting the year, everything is fresh. You're just in the beginning stages of teaching the engineering design process. Students are learning, and you're on that beginning learning curve. You're going to give a little bit more grace, a little bit more leniency as you're teaching. And yes, we know, good engineers, good scientists, you're going to have to revamp your ideas. But then gradually, as the year moves on, you begin to put some reservations, some more rules in place as you go through on certain activities, and say, on this one, I want you to plan out what you need first. because you also can stress that if you were doing this project or activity on a large scale, certain supplies might cost money. So there's a whole other aspect, a whole other cross-curricular example that you could pull in to the activity as well. So again, both ways. You can start out more lenient and then gradually work up to other aspects of that engineering design process.
I like that. And when you said about adding some more limitations and things and adding more cross-curricular into it, one of the other things that we had talked about was adding like a math component into it. So every group gets, $20 to spend, and pipe cleaners cost, 50 cents per pipe cleaner. So they have to create, they have their budget, they have to decide ahead of time, they have to do a drawing to plan out what they're going to do. So rather than just saying, here, go for it, as you kind of said, as they're getting more comfortable with this process and learning and growing, you're going to get them to be a little bit more specific in what they're doing. So I'm really happy that you shared that process, because some people coming in and just being like, what STEM activities can I do? It's not just about the STEM activities, but what are we teaching our students? So adding those next layers in, I really liked. But anyways, I'll stop talking. We can move on to the next activity. Thank you for that information. That was great.
Great. So our next one is the 3 Billy Goats Gruff Challenge. As we know, our goats are in a situation where they can't cross the bridge because of a nasty troll. The challenge for students will be to build a raft to help the goats cross the stream and avoid the nasty troll. The procedures for your students will be to build the raft, then place it in the water. Next, they'll begin to add 10 grams of mass every 10 seconds. For every 10 seconds the raft stays afloat, they'll add 10 more grams. How many grams can they add? If the raft sinks, encourage students to adjust their raft design and try again. Don't forget to have students record their answers. Supplies for students. Individually, they'll need pipe cleaners and straws, and then as a group, they'll need water, bins, and gram weights.
One of the things I liked about on the previous slide that you had was the challenge wasn't done, right? Where you had them create their raft, put the 10 grams on, and if it floats, it's not like, oh, you're done, and now you can go read a book. It was, okay, we're going to add another 10 grams, or we're going to add some more weight, and that you have to keep building it and designing it to make it withstand as much weight as you possibly can. So I like that there was that next level up, because you always get the group of kids that get it right away, and it's like, and then what? So right. I appreciated that you add that next level to it. I'm curious to know how you set up this activity with your students. Does every group get their own bucket with water? Do you have your own, like a station where the bucket and the water is in one spot where you can kind of watch it more? How do you set that up so that it's, classroom management friendly?
Generally, what I would do if this was in my classroom, I would have the bins of water pre-set up. And I like the bins that are pictured here. There's a pretty good depth to them, so they would not be overflowing. And obviously, to see if things sink or float, you don't need a huge amount of water in a bin. So that way they can get carried across the room. You encourage students that you want to make sure the water stays in the bin, not on other people. A phrase I always like to use when working with water or other liquids, make sure we keep it contained. No one wore their swimsuits to school today. And that was always kind of a good motivator to the kids as well. So make sure it stays contained. They do walk it across the room and then either pour it down the sink or in a larger bucket. And then one lucky team can go dump it outside.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it probably also depends on the age group of your students. With kindergartners, maybe you might just have, I don't know if you'd be doing this with the wee young ones, but if you were to do a challenge similar to this, you'd probably have one bucket that you're watching where once they've created it, they bring it over and you kind of help put the weights on them.
Absolutely.
Your fifth graders, probably every group could have their own bucket with water. So I think that probably also depends.
Yes.
Too.
As we've been saying, the teachers will know their own kiddos better than we do. Yes. So just keep modifying based on your individual classes.
Yes, fantastic.
And throughout, you can encourage your kids by saying phrases or showing pictures that relates back to the fairy tale. So you can remind them as time's rolling on, the troll is starting to grumble, so get your goats to floating. And then our next activity is Little Red Riding Hood's Zip Line Challenge. So the challenge will be to construct a zip line straight to Grandma's house. This way she can avoid all the dangers of the forest. And so students here may work alone or with a partner. So for this activity, students will choose 5 of the following supplies. I know this is different from before as the other ones have already been chosen. So here you'll encourage them to plan out their activity for their zip line prior. So they can choose from string, straws, paper clips, pipe cleaners, clothespins, rubber bands, or popsicle sticks. All students will get a basket and a recording sheet. And then for the group, they'll get scissors, measuring tape, and a timer. So as they create their zip line, make sure that each time down the zip, they record how long it takes in time to get from point A to point B.
I like adding that time constraint onto it too, because then they can keep trying to get a better time and a better time and a better time. So again, that engineering design process of designing your thing to be faster and better as you do it. The one thing I really liked about this activity was the choice that you give to students, which we haven't seen a ton of in the other activities, right? They're all pretty structured. Whereas with this one, I think when you give students choice, that engagement piece and that motivation piece goes that much higher up, because then, they're choosing things that they want to be able to use. I think the other cool thing is, depending on how you set this up as the teacher and how much time you have, you can set it up where you could choose this. If you're realizing it doesn't work, come back, exchange those pieces out and get a different one. So I do like adding that choice piece in.
I've also seen it before when I was observing a teacher trying this activity in her classroom. She had students first justify why they chose the 5 materials they did. And then if something didn't work out, they had to justify why they changed to something else. So there was also that integration of the ELA piece of writing as they were going through. So they were recording in their science notebooks as they were going through the activity as well, which was great to then come back on in the end when everyone was going through the activity as a class to share what worked, what didn't work, why it worked. And everyone had fantastic notes, and it was a very early elementary class, so it was very impressive.
That's really impressive. No, and I like that addition of that piece too. You can add the math components into it. You can add those literature components. You can get them, like you said, presenting their case for why they're doing something different. Because in any job, we don't just get any money that we want to create something. We always have to justify why we're doing the project, how it's going to work, return on investment. So you're kind of getting kids to think of those things ahead of time, which I really like. I do have a question for you. When you set up this activity with the zip line, because you are going to need something that is a little bit higher up to get it to move. Are kids allowed to use chairs and desks that they can tape stuff to? Do they have to just build it from the material that's given? What are some of the criteria or constraints that you give to students or that you've seen done?
In the past, when I'm personally demoing the activity, I set up the zip line myself. However, that's for time purposes. However, I've seen teachers set up the zip lines. I've also seen them have an activity where they set up a zip line, and then they also allow students to set up the zip line themselves and base it on what does the criteria say. And I know that was stated earlier as well. So if it's not stated in the criteria, then the sky is the limit, as long as it's within safe parameters.
Awesome. I like that too.
As we begin to wrap up our session today and reflect on the fairy tale STEM activities that we've done, I wanted to say that all activities can also be changed up and modified to reflect STEM and coding projects as well. We also offer additional activities and information on the STEM coding and robotics in the classroom as well.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of different activities that you can do with, I mean, the sky's the limit when it comes to robotics and coding, as you know. So with these STEM challenges, having kids build and create is one form of STEM, and then having them program is another form of it. So, thinking of Red Riding Hood, maybe we're not creating a zip line, but maybe we're finding the right path to grandma's house, and we have to use the Ozobot robot to program Ozobot to get through the right path without, meeting up with the wolf or whatever it is that's being done. So there's definitely a lot of different any robot that you can think of, you can program and code to move through some type of maze, so lots of different things that you can kind of create with it.
Absolutely.
So we've got Lynette's contact information there for you to check out. We also want you to share your students' creations with us on social media. You can use the hashtag Enchanted Engineers and tag at School Specialty. We are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on pretty much anything and everything that you can think of. So definitely tag us, let us know. So this is the photo that I was telling you all about of the tower that my group created at the conference. And it's pretty weak looking, I'll be honest. Our intention was to create a tripod at the bottom, but we were limited in time and we were stressed out and we were all very competitive, and I think we got in our own heads. As you can see, the tower in the back was definitely a lot taller than ours was, but it was a lot of fun. So share it out. As you can see, I don't have anybody's faces in it. I don't have anybody's name tags in it. We want to just see kind of the projects and what people are doing, and let us know if this activity's worked for you. Also, let us know if you have questions. We popped up Lynette's.
Or how you modified it within your own classroom.
Yes, exactly.
We're always looking for modifications as well on how we could share it with other teachers on how to make things better.
Exactly. So we
appreciate classroom hacks.
Exactly. Yes, I love that. Classroom hacks. Maybe we should call it hashtag Enchanted Engineers, hashtag classroom hacks. So we've got our contact information on there for you. Reach out to us if you have any questions. We've also got some other, if you're interested in learning more about Enchanted Engineers and integrating fairy tales into your classroom with STEM concepts, we do have a 3-hour and 6-hour workshop that Lynette created herself that your district can purchase and bring Lynette in to share more ideas on this, where teachers get a chance to try these activities out, see what they can look like, see how you can modify, join in on discussions about how you would change things up or the classroom hacks that you would have. So if you're interested in learning more, you can contact one of our specialists to learn how you can get access to this workshop. You can just go to that link right there, scroll to the bottom of the page, fill out that form, and we'll definitely contact you with more information. If you're looking for literature or material from this webinar, as far as supplies, you can find it all online on our website, schoolspecialty.com. All the supplies and fairy tale books can be purchased there. And anything that you need, we sell school supplies, we sell robotics and coding. We have the fairy tale books ready to go for you. So just let us know. We're here to support and help out. So that is it. We appreciate your time and spending your time with us here. If you have any questions, like I said, we're here to answer those questions. So Lynette, thank you so much for sharing your information, and we'll see y'all soon.
Thank you.